Have you ever wondered why bots like Grimlock, Overlord, and Megatron are so powerful and can take so much punishment? I mean, is it just because they're bigger? I mean, I used to think that's all it was, you know? They're bigger so they can take more punishment, kind of like a tank can take more punishment than an infantryman. I'm fine. But according to IDW, there's a little bit more to it than that. And it's not really just to do with size. It's because some of these guys are 0.1 percenters. So in this vid, I'm going to explain exactly what that is, what makes them special. I'm going to go through all of IDW's known 1 percenters, and I'm going to speculate on which other bots from other continuities might fall under this category as well. So please consider liking, sharing, subscribing, and all that good stuff, because there's still 76% of viewers who aren't subscribed. Come on, guys. All right, enough. Let's get to it. This whole thing starts when sparks first come into existence. So in this continuity, Transformers are made in one of two ways. Either they're constructed cold, which in brief means the spark is cloned and implanted into a body, or they're forged. Now forging deals with naturally occurring sparks. Basically, Vector Sigma will very, very occasionally emit an enormous pulse of energy that travels across Cybertron and its moons, and no one knows how exactly, but this results in the apparition, or ignition as they put it, of a spark field, or as they're more commonly known, a hotspot. They can be absolutely vast, and can even appear on Titans because it helps them spread Cybertronian life across the galaxy. Anyway, the bots will then nurture these sparks until they're mature enough to be harvested, then surround it with Sentio Metallico, which then bonds with the spark and forms limbs and a body and eventually matures and learns to transform, etc.
Sensual almost, don't you think?
So most of these sparks are blue, but once in a while, a green one appears. And because of their rarity, well, that's, hence their name 0.1 percenters. Their name, I guess, indicating that there's one green one for every 1,000 blue sparks. These green sparks possess many mysterious special properties, so they're highly coveted by the powers that be. For example, Thunderwing performed horrible experiments upon himself to try and turn his spark green, resulting in, well, you can go check out my most powerful Decepticons vid if you want more info on that. These green sparks emit some sort of radiation too that makes them highly dangerous to harvest, as these two poor souls found out. They stumbled upon a green spark and witnessed its first flash. Now, first flash, I guess, is radiation or something, because they were quickly informed that exposure to it meant having only 6 hours left to live. The green spark's main asset is the ability to produce enough energy to power heavy chassis and thick armor plating, which earn them the nickname heavyweights, supremely powerful beings that can inflict utter carnage. For example, Fort Max, who wasn't even a Titan in IDW, was actually one of the weaker ones, still managed to rack up a kill count of 10,000 Decepticons in the Shimanzi massacre. Now, I don't know how many of those 10,000 were Vacons, but 10,000 is a huge number. Yeah, Shimanzi was no picnic. I'll talk about that more when I do worst massacres in Transformers, but I've got to be in the right frame of mind for that one. But Fort Max also managed to withstand being tortured by Chainsaw at the hands of Overlord. They have insane durability. Roller was another one of these guys. He was this humongous Autobot who was so big he transformed into a Cybertronian prison transport, a mobile holding cell, if you will. So he was clearly big and tough enough to contain large and very angry Decepticons. He was somewhat of an exception to the other 0.1 percenters, like he was actually pretty timid, and for some reason he didn't have the immense confidence that many of the other 0.1 percenters had. He was paired up with Orion Pax as a security officer, but his lack of confidence got him into trouble despite his physical power. Like here, he got held hostage, and his inferiority complex grew so large, especially around the nearly supernaturally gifted outliers, that he started taking a stimulant, a drug basically, called C32. Now that touches on another common trait of 0.1 percenters, which is their tendency to become pretty unhinged with a penchant for obsession and fanaticism. Tarn, perfect example. He was more than a little unhinged, I think you'd agree, having levels of sadism never seen before in the franchise. And it all stemmed from this fanatical adoration of Megatron and the Decepticon cause. Add to this the fact that his green spark was probably the reason he had supernatural abilities and could control other bots with his voice. You can see why he went completely mental and developed this kind of warped Jesus complex. As well as this, he became addicted to Nucleon, would bathe himself in vats of the stuff. One commonly reported side effect of Nucleon abuse was the loss of transformation ability, which meant that he had to constantly swap out his T-Cog. Equally, Heretek was this huge religious fanatic that literally had a replica of the Matrix of Leadership on his forehead, which would be like having a crucifix superglued between your fucking eyes. He turns into one of those massive tunnel boring machines, by the way. I didn't really know that until now. I did a whole vid on Scorponok and his exploits, but in short, he was one of the most powerful gladiators in the fighting pit. He got rid of Megatron and used his superior size and power to intimidate all the other cons into following his leadership. Then he blew up a refinery, causing God knows how many deaths, and then woke rampagey Dino Titan Trypticon. He survived when Magnus shot him in the head. He would just squish people's heads left, right, and center. One of the most powerful of these, though, was Grimlock, who I often find myself thinking that the Autobots are fortunate that he's on their side. One time in the early days, he and his team came across these creatures called cybermorphic predators and were able to scan them and take on these hugely powerful alt modes. Again, all that power made him spin slightly off center and he became kind of unhinged and ended up killing the outfit's medical officer called Scar. As I said before, their ability to withstand pain and regenerate quickly meant that the 0.1%ers were prime targets for every mad professor in their wild experiments, the most extreme of which resulted in the creation of the Phase 6s, which saw their endoskeletons being bonded with a super metal called an untrium, rendering them pretty much indestructible. Black Shadow was one of these, and he single-handedly razed the planet of Rigel 4 and took on a whole Autobot battalion by himself, killing over 3,000 Autobots. When the DJD finally caught up to this guy, he took an unbelievable amount of punishment before finally exploding in a huge release of energy. Another of these Phase 6s was Overlord, who, while Black Shadow showed that he had a financial motivation for some of his actions, Overlord just lived to inflict suffering. After the non-untrium process was complete, he killed the scientist in charge and would have gone after Megatron too, but Megatron coded a virus into his programming that would keep Overlord from turning on him. Anyway, this guy was nearly unkillable and had to be separated into two and have his lower half thrown into the past and top half into the future to finally stop him. They reckon the IDW Shockwave was a 0.1%er as well, which is a little surprising because raw physical power isn't necessarily what I think of when I think of Shockwave. I mean, sure, he's powerful, but he's not quite the same brand of sadistic killing machine that some of the others on this list are. He does have that penchant for becoming obsessed with his goal and, of course, going to all the lengths to achieve it. Of the three Phase 6s, the most feared wasn't Overlord, though. It was Sixhot. Remember the Six Changer, the guy who killed Ultra Magnus in the Headmaster's cartoon? This guy, on top of undergoing the process where he had an untrium bonded to a skeleton, he also had armature composed of metals drawn from the core of a black hole, as well as something called a dark matter fission cell that could self-regenerate and bring untold amounts of power into the equation to help him bring entire civilizations to their end. He blew the Ark out of the sky with a single shot. He took on 7 Autobots without even breaking a sweat. And one time, the evil bastard started blowing up all the ambulances in the area just to get Ratchet to come out of hiding. It wasn't until Optimus appeared that his assault was slowed. And I would have really liked to have seen how this fight would have ended, but Sixhot was called back to Con headquarters to deal with the humongously powerful aliens called the Reapers. Anyway, he was later crushed by an almighty smoosh from Metroplex, and he survived just fine, going on to terrorize Goldbug and the Throttlebots some more. Talking about Optimus, IDW had him down as a 0.1%er too, so obviously in this universe he was pretty powerful even before getting the Matrix of Leadership. In this one, he used his power to enforce the will of Zeta Prime and his autocracy. I do sometimes wonder if there's any way to figure out which incarnation of Optimus and Megatron, for example, are the most powerful. Anyway, I digress. Now when it comes to Megatron, there was a little bit of a debate as to whether he was a 0.1%er or not, but honestly, I don't see how he couldn't be. And if he wasn't originally, he definitely became one after he was damaged and Weil put in a new green spark in him. It was officially stated that he was a hybrid of a constructed cold body and a 0.1%er forged spark. Get your head around that. The 0.1%er that I can't forget to talk about is Grimlock. This is a guy who knew nothing but battle and conflict, even before he ended up in the fighting pits, where he met Slag, and the two formed their own fighting group called the Dinobots. Dino spelt with a Y because obviously there were no dinosaurs in the equation at that stage. His spark makes him understandably volatile too, simply not understanding why, as a being of such immense power, he should have any rules imposed upon him. But most importantly, despite all of his grumblings, he's loyal to the Autobots when it counts the most. I've seen this guy fight everyone, no matter how big, no matter how tough. Here he is taking on Fort Max. I've seen him fight Tarn, one time mangling his face up something proper. Scorponok, Shockwave, and of course he loves picking arguments with Optimus even if the Prime doesn't often engage. His unit was famed for turning the tides in many battles, and he even survived being flayed by Shockwave at one point. So those guys are the known heavyweights. But where this gets really interesting is that, as I said at the start, it isn't really to do with how big a bot is. There's another type of 1%er called load bearers, and they're much, much smaller, but have enough power to carry much larger body parts and armaments, and have the type of enhancements that other bots just wouldn't survive. Now, all this came to light when it was discovered that the real Ultra Magnus had actually been killed fairly early in the war. But to save the troops the hit and morale, they decided to keep his legend alive. So they took one of these small 0.1%ers and added Ultra Magnus-like body parts to him to make it seem like Magnus was still alive. And they kept doing this over and over again. After one load bearer died after being thrown into some crazy suicide mission, they'd just replace him, with there being several load bearers to have had the name over the years. This guy, Minimus Ambus, survived having his head crushed by Justice Tyrest, with him showing up as good as new just a couple of issues later. I love how he tried to beef himself up with facial hair. Okay, so let's say that this 0.1%er thing was a thing across all the continuities. Who do you reckon fits the bill? Now, I've been thinking about this for days, but before I go into it, give me 10 seconds of your time, please, because I've just signed a partnership with Gamersups. If this is your thing, you can use my discount code NORMZONE to get 10% off. That's right, I said NORMZONE. You get amazing flavors. NORMZONE. Long-lasting energy. NORMZOne. Waifu cups, if that's your thing. And I get a tiny little commission. NORMZONE. Okay, so who else could be a 0.1%er? IDW's version of Star Saber was another one that I have my suspicions about. He was hugely powerful, and a religious zealot too. This continuity did something interesting with Star Saber, whereas the original Japanese version was an Autobot Brainmaster. This guy put his worship of Primus above all, and came to be known as the Dark Evangelist, and betrayed Die Atlas's group called the Circle of Light to Chief Justice Tyrest, who was another nutjob who used to drill holes in himself, but that's another story. When Tyrest became disappointed that Ultra Magnus wasn't fanatical enough, he appointed Star Saber as his chief enforcer. Deathsaurus is definitely in with a shout of being one. As is Roadbuster, I reckon. He's a big boy. I would have said Impactor. Powerful, check. Obsessive, check. Few screws loose, check. But he was discounted at one point. Discounted? No, that's not the word I'm looking for. Dismissed? Discredited? He was noped. That's the word. That'll do. He was noped. It was the blue whale. The blue, fuck. What's his name? Tidal Wave. He's got to be one, right? He's a fucking blue whale. From Transformers Prime. Other than Primes and Megs, of course, I would say Skyquake and Dreadwing, Hardshell. The Predacons are fairly safe bets, but I think they have their own reasons for being as powerful as they are. Oh, and that version of Shockwave definitely felt like one. From G1, Skylink springs to mind first. Brawn might be as well. I don't know, with G1 it's hard to tell because in one scene, any particular bot might seem quite powerful, but then in the next scene they're getting thrown around like a ragdoll. It's pretty inconsistent. Astro Train, though, is probably one. Okay, that's just a quick skim over the surface, as I'm sure there are many others who might qualify. I'm sure you guys will think of some, so make sure you're putting them in the comments below. Next up will be Transformers who switch sides, and I might do a recap of Earthspark Season 1, because I've never actually watched it properly. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of that. And if you want to support me further, you can check out memberships for a little extra content here and there. And don't forget, when you're ordering your Gamersups. Okay, as always, I'm super grateful that you've taken the time to watch my videos, so thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you very soon for the next one. Cheerio, bye!